It was a moment that nobody saw coming, one that would set the world buzzing. In the sacred heart of the Vatican, with the world's leaders gathered to pay their respects to Pope Francis, something unexpected happened. On the world stage, where diplomacy, power, and protocol are the language of the day, French President Emmanuel Macron made a bold, silent statement. He walked past former U.S. President Donald Trump and refused to shake his hand. A seemingly small act, yet one that reverberated across the globe. This wasn't just about a handshake. This was a diplomatic rejection, a message so loud it didn't need words. And it happened at a moment when the world was watching, when global leaders had gathered in mourning, when unity was supposed to prevail. But why did Macron do it? What was behind this dramatic, unprecedented act of defiance? And what does it tell us about the future of international relations? In the world of diplomacy, a simple gesture can carry as much weight as a formal speech. A handshake can symbolize peace, alliance, or reconciliation. But what happens when that handshake is refused? This simple act of denial speaks volumes in a world where every gesture is watched, analyzed, and interpreted. And when this act occurs in the sacred halls of the Vatican, a place known for fostering peace and reconciliation, it takes on even greater significance. In this video, we'll break down the moment that shook global diplomacy, the refusal of President Macron to shake President Trump's hand at the funeral of Pope Francis. We'll explore the symbolism, the reactions, and what this could mean for the future of international politics. From tensions between Europe and America to the shifting power dynamics on the global stage, let's dive deep into the diplomatic implications of this bold gesture. In a world of relentless political maneuvering, there are few places that remain untouched by controversy. The Vatican, however, has long stood as a symbol of unity and peace, a beacon for diplomacy. But even here, among the sacred walls of St. Peter's Basilica, politics cannot be entirely avoided. When we think of the Vatican, we think of the Pope's role in advocating for global peace, diplomacy, and humanitarian efforts. It's here, in the heart of this spiritual center, that we see the intersection of religion and power. But the Vatican is not just a spiritual place, it is a political one as well. Throughout history, it has been the meeting point for great diplomatic talks, a neutral ground where conflicting parties have often come together. So, when the world's most powerful leaders gather in such a solemn place, the stakes are higher than ever. The Vatican was not just a backdrop, it was a stage. A place where global leaders were expected to show respect for the occasion and for each other. Yet, when Macron walked past Trump without a handshake, it was a powerful act of defiance in a setting known for fostering diplomacy and reconciliation. The Vatican has witnessed historic moments of diplomacy in the past, including the 1989 meeting between President Ronald Reagan and Soviet General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev. That handshake was seen as a symbol of the thawing of the Cold War. Similarly, Pope John Paul II played a pivotal role in bringing leaders together in the 1990s to mediate peace talks in Eastern Europe. The Vatican is no stranger to the role of an intermediary, a place where world leaders, no matter their differences, came together to find common ground. But on this occasion, when Macron chose to walk past Trump and shake hands with Zelensky, he was not just refusing a personal gesture, he was challenging a larger political narrative. He was rejecting the very ideals that Trump represented in global politics. The very choice of venue for this encounter adds layers to the meaning of Macron's refusal. The Vatican is not just a place for religious observance, it is a diplomatic hub, a neutral ground where even the most contentious global issues have been addressed. To act in defiance here, in front of the world's media, was to send a signal, loud and clear, that Macron would not simply conform to the norms of global politics as they had been set under Trump's leadership. But more than that, Macron's refusal reflected the changing dynamics of the political order. This was a symbolic act, but one deeply rooted in reality, Europe's growing divergence from the United States. As the European Union navigates challenges like the Ukraine war and internal divisions, Macron's actions suggested a more assertive Europe, one less willing to be led by the whims of a populist, controversial figure like Trump. In 1984, the Vatican played host to one of the most symbolic diplomatic moments of the 20th century, the first meeting between Israeli and Palestinian leaders. The Vatican, under Pope John Paul II, worked tirelessly to mediate peace talks. It was the place where adversaries were willing to sit down and engage, because the environment fostered mutual respect and understanding. This backdrop, the solemnity of the Vatican, made Macron's decision to withhold his hand even more powerful. Macron was not rejecting Trump in a casual setting, he was doing so in a place where tradition demanded respect, especially at a global funeral event. In many ways, Macron's rejection represented the slow but certain shift in global politics. Europe, it seemed, was no longer content with the role of passive participant in America's global narrative. To understand why Macron made such a significant gesture, we must first understand his position as a leader of Europe and his complex relationship with Donald Trump. Emmanuel Macron has always seen himself as the voice of a united Europe, an advocate for multilateralism and diplomacy in a world increasingly dominated by populism. From the very beginning of his presidency, Macron has opposed Trump's America First policies, which often put America's interests above the global good. The two leaders have clashed on a variety of issues, from the Paris Climate Agreement to NATO. Macron has been a strong proponent of collective action on climate change, while Trump's decision to withdraw from the Paris Agreement was seen as a direct challenge to global efforts to combat environmental issues. Their disagreements were not limited to environmental policy. Macron also took a strong stance against Trump's trade policies, particularly the imposition of tariffs on European goods. Macron, representing the European Union, was a vocal critic of Trump's protectionist tendencies. But perhaps the most significant difference between Macron and Trump was their approach to international diplomacy. Trump's America First rhetoric often alienated allies, while Macron positioned himself as a global leader advocating for unity, cooperation, and the strengthening of international institutions. Their interactions over the years have been far from friendly. At the 2019 G7 summit in Biarritz, France, tensions between the two leaders were palpable. Macron criticized Trump's approach to global institutions, while Trump often seemed dismissive of Macron's calls for a united Europe. In fact, there were even reports that Trump had dismissed Macron's concerns as being out of touch with the real political landscape. Their personal relationship was strained, but it was the political differences that really set them apart. Macron, a staunch believer in European solidarity and multilateralism, often found himself at odds with Trump's America First approach, which he saw as a dangerous step back from the global cooperation that had defined the post-World War II order. For Macron, this refusal to shake Trump's hand was not just an act of personal defiance, it was part of a broader diplomatic strategy. As the leader of France, and by extension one of Europe's most prominent voices, Macron has positioned himself as the leader of the European Union in the battle against rising nationalism and populism. He's called for a strong, united Europe that would stand as a counterbalance to both the United States and Russia. Macron's refusal to engage with Trump at such a significant event was a clear signal that he was unwilling to compromise on the values of diplomacy, multilateralism, and European unity. It was a statement that Europe, under his leadership, would not simply follow in the footsteps of an American president who often acted in isolation. By distancing himself from Trump, Macron was reaffirming his position as the champion of a united Europe. This was not just a refusal to shake hands, it was a refusal to accept Trump's worldview, which often undermined the very institutions that have kept peace and stability in Europe for decades. Macron's actions in that moment, during such a deeply emotional and significant occasion, cannot be viewed as just a political gesture. They were a reflection of his deep convictions about the future of Europe and the global order. In refusing to shake Trump's hand, Macron was not only rejecting Trump's political influence, but he was also making a statement about the future direction of global diplomacy. The world reacted swiftly to Macron's refusal, and the responses were varied, ranging from praise to criticism. In Europe, many saw Macron's gesture as a bold, principled stand. His refusal to shake Trump's hand was seen as a rejection of Trump's divisive policies and an affirmation of Macron's vision for a united Europe. It was also interpreted as a message that Europe, under Macron's leadership, would not align itself with Trump's America First approach. In Paris, Macron's supporters applauded his courage in publicly distancing himself from the former President of the United States. Some analysts even argued that Macron's refusal was not just a personal snub but a diplomatic maneuver aimed at strengthening his position in Europe and reaffirming his commitment to multilateralism. By rejecting Trump in the heart of the Vatican, Macron was positioning himself as the leader of a new European order, one that would be more assertive in its dealings with global superpowers, including the United States. On the other side of the Atlantic, the response was far less forgiving. Trump's supporters were outraged by Macron's snub. To them, this was an ungracious and unnecessary act, especially at a moment meant for mourning and reflection. For many conservative commentators, this was a deliberate insult, a sign that Macron and other European leaders were more interested in defying Trump than engaging in constructive dialogue. In the US, this gesture further fueled the divide between Trump's populist base and the traditional political establishment, which was becoming increasingly critical of his leadership. Macron's refusal, in the eyes of some, was seen as a symbol of the broader global backlash against Trump's America First ideology. On social media, the reactions were intense and immediate. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram were flooded with opinions, memes, and analysis. For many, Macron's actions became a symbol of European resistance to Trump's policies. For others, it was simply a bad look for diplomacy. Some posts depicted Macron's refusal as a victory for international cooperation, while others mocked it as an act of unnecessary political drama. The global media, eager to capitalize on the controversy, quickly framed the incident as a diplomatic showdown, one that would have implications far beyond a single handshake. And then it happened. The moment that no one expected, a moment that, while fleeting, would resonate far beyond the walls of the Vatican. As world leaders gathered to pay their respects at the funeral of Pope Francis, a moment of international significance unfolded when French President Emmanuel Macron chose not to shake the hand of former U.S. President Donald Trump. Instead, he walked past him, heading straight for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, whom he warmly greeted with a handshake. The camera captured it all, Trump's hand still extended, while Macron, without a glance, moved forward. The coldness of the gesture sent a message louder than words ever could. This was not just about a personal preference or a momentary lapse in etiquette. This was a deliberate diplomatic action that spoke volumes about the state of global politics in 2025. A handshake is often seen as a symbol of respect, unity, or reconciliation in the world of diplomacy. The act of refusing to engage with someone as prominent as Trump, especially in a public setting, was more than just an unspoken snub. It was an act of powerful symbolism. Macron's decision to walk past Trump, not even acknowledging him with a handshake, wasn't a random, isolated action, it was a calculated diplomatic move. In that one instant, Macron's refusal conveyed his disapproval of Trump's policies, his disregard for the approach that Trump had taken towards the global order, and perhaps even a personal rejection of the former president's influence on the world stage. The Vatican, a place associated with peace and unity, was not just a setting, it was a backdrop that gave extra weight to the gesture. Macron's actions were not just about rejecting Trump personally, but rejecting the global political environment that Trump had shaped. By turning away from Trump, Macron sent a message to the world that Europe would not passively accept the type of politics that Trump represented. The reaction to Macron's refusal was swift and varied. Within moments, the event went viral. In a world where every gesture, no matter how small, can be broadcast instantly, this moment was no exception. In the US, the reactions from Trump's supporters were filled with outrage. Conservative media outlets quickly condemned Macron's actions, calling it disrespectful and inappropriate. For many Trump supporters, this was seen as a deliberate attack on the former president's dignity, a signal that Europe, led by Macron, was fully rejecting Trump's legacy. On the other side, many Europeans and global commentators saw Macron's refusal as a symbol of courage, a bold statement against Trump's populist agenda. Macron was being hailed as a leader who was willing to challenge the norms and stand up for the values of a united, multilateral world order. It was clear that this moment would dominate headlines, and its implications would be felt far beyond the funeral of Pope Francis. It was a sign that global politics had reached a new crossroads, a moment where gestures of diplomacy held as much power as the speeches and agreements that followed. Macron's refusal to shake Trump's hand was a reflection of the growing divide between Europe and the United States. Over the years, we have seen the rise of populism across the globe, with Trump as one of its most prominent figures. But in Europe, there has been a growing pushback against these populist movements. Macron's leadership in France has been a cornerstone of the effort to preserve European unity and multilateralism. By rejecting Trump at this moment, Macron was sending a very clear message: Europe was not going to follow the populist path that Trump had paved. The refusal was a symbolic turning point, a rejection of Trump's America First policies, which often ignored the concerns and interests of Europe. For Macron, this act was about reaffirming Europe's sovereignty, its values, and its willingness to stand up for them in the face of global challenges. The decision to refuse Trump was not just about one handshake, it was about Europe taking control of its own political destiny. In a world where diplomacy is often dictated by formal agreements and carefully crafted speeches, Macron's refusal was a reminder that diplomacy can also be shaped by personal gestures. Sometimes, the most powerful messages are the ones we don't say aloud. Macron's refusal to shake Trump's hand in the sacred halls of the Vatican was one such message. It was a moment that resonated with global significance, showing that even in a time of great division, the small, personal acts of resistance can send the loudest and clearest messages. The world is watching, and as global politics continues to evolve, moments like this will be remembered not just for the policies they challenged, but for the profound personal statements they made. And so, as Europe moves forward in the post-Trump era, this moment of rejection may mark the beginning of a new era in international diplomacy, one where gestures of defiance can alter the course of history. The moment Macron rejected Trump's handshake, the world took notice. Within minutes, social media was flooded with opinions, and the global media machine picked up the story, creating a viral storm that swept across political and cultural boundaries. But the reactions were as varied as the political landscape itself. In Europe, many saw it as a bold, principled stand. Macron's refusal to engage with Trump was celebrated by those who believed that Europe should assert its independence from the controversial American leader. For these commentators, the act was a symbol of Europe reclaiming its place in global diplomacy, refusing to bow to Trump's America First rhetoric. For Macron's supporters, this refusal was a sign that Europe had not forgotten its values. Macron had long positioned himself as the leader of a united Europe, one that would stand up to the rise of populism both in the US and across the continent. Macron's act of rejecting Trump was seen as a powerful reminder that Europe would not simply accept a world order shaped by unilateral actions and populist politics. It was a rejection of the very approach that Trump had used to govern, an approach based on transactional relationships and nationalistic policies. Analysts argued that Macron's gesture was a reminder of the importance of values-based leadership in international relations. It was a rare instance where a leader publicly defied a more powerful counterpart for the sake of principle. On the other side of the Atlantic, the response was far less supportive. Trump's supporters were outraged by Macron's snub. To them, it wasn't just a refusal, it was an insult to an American president. Conservative media outlets, especially those aligned with Trump, seized on the moment, framing Macron's rejection as a personal attack on Trump's dignity. Many Trump supporters and right-wing commentators interpreted this as a political stunt. They saw it as a symbol of Europe's growing hostility toward America, a hostility that had been simmering since Trump's presidency and continued even after his departure from office. For them, Macron's refusal was a slap in the face, a sign that Europe had become more interested in grandstanding than working with the United States. Critics argued that such actions were counterproductive, undermining diplomatic efforts at a time when global cooperation was needed most. Some even questioned whether this symbolic gesture was an attempt by Macron to assert his own leadership in Europe at the expense of transatlantic relations. As expected, social media erupted. Macron's refusal quickly became a trending topic on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. The reactions were immediate, with users from all over the world commenting on the significance of the moment. Some memes humorously depicted Macron as a hero standing up to the Trump regime, while others mocked it as an unnecessary drama that stole attention from the purpose of the gathering. But beyond the humor, the real discussion was much deeper. People were debating the role of symbolism in global politics. Could one simple gesture really change the direction of international diplomacy? Was Macron's refusal a reflection of a larger political shift, or just an emotional reaction to a past conflict? The question loomed, was this a bold, principled move, or just another moment of political performance? As the dust settled, it became clear that Macron's refusal was more than just a spontaneous act. It was part of a larger, calculated diplomatic strategy. Macron has long been vocal about his vision for a stronger, more independent Europe, one that would not be swayed by the whims of any single leader, especially not Trump. Macron's rejection of Trump was, in many ways, a reaffirmation of Europe's autonomy. Europe, under Macron's leadership, was making it clear that it would not be led by the same isolationist policies that had defined Trump's approach to international relations. The EU was preparing for a future where it could act more independently, where European unity would be the guiding force, not American influence. In the end, Macron's decision to refuse Trump's handshake was more than just a moment of political theater. It was a reflection of the broader shifts occurring within global diplomacy. As the world grapples with rising populism, economic uncertainty, and shifting alliances, symbolic gestures like these are becoming more powerful than ever. Macron's actions made a bold statement about the direction of European diplomacy, about the importance of values over transactional politics. The world watched, and for a moment, diplomacy was no longer about words or speeches, but about the quiet power of gestures that spoke louder than any policy. As we look back on this moment in history, the question remains, what lasting impact will this simple, yet powerful, gesture have on global diplomacy? Was it the beginning of a new era for Europe's relationship with America, or just another moment in the ongoing drama of international politics? One thing is certain, Macron's refusal to shake Trump's hand will be remembered as one of the defining moments of their relationship, and a powerful reminder that sometimes, the smallest gestures can create the loudest echoes in the world of diplomacy. Let us know what you think in the comments. How do you interpret Macron's decision? Was it a symbol of Europe's independence, or just an unnecessary diplomatic snub? Like, share, and subscribe for more insights into global politics.